President.
Mr. Frost.
"30 seconds to tape roll. 30 seconds. Settling. Settle.
Well, if today's session is anything like our phone call, it should be explosive.
What phone call?
A phone call to my hotel room.
David, starting on camera 3 in 4, 3, 2, and...
Now, looking back on your final year in office, do you feel you ever obstructed justice or were part of a conspiracy to cover up or obstruct justice?
No. And I'm interested that you use the term obstruction of justice. Now, you perhaps have not read the statute with regard to the obstruction of justice.
As it happens, I have.
Oh, you have, you say? Well, then, you'll know. It doesn't just require an act. It requires a specific corrupt motive. And in this case, I didn't have a corrupt motive. What I was doing was in the interest of political containment.
Well, be that as it may, the direct consequences of your actions would have been that 2 of the convicted burglars would have escaped criminal prosecution. Now, how can that not be a cover-up or obstruction of justice?
Well, I think the record shows, Mr. Frost, that far from obstructing justice, I was actively facilitating it. When Pat Gray of the FBI telephoned me, this was July 6th, I said, Pat, you go right ahead with your investigation. That's hardly what you call obstructing justice.
Well, that may be, but for 2 weeks prior to July 6th, we now know that you were desperately trying to contain or block the investigation. No, obstruction of justice is obstruction of justice, whether it's for a minute or 5 minutes, and it's no defense to say that your plan failed. I mean, if I tried to rob a bank and failed, that's no defense. I still tried to rob the bank.
Will you just wait 1 minute there, Mr. Frost? There is no evidence of any kind.
Well, the reason there is no evidence is because 18.5 minutes of the conversation with Bob Haldeman from this June period have mysteriously been erased.
That was an unfortunate oversight. And Bob Haldeman is a rigorous and a conscientious note-taker. His notes are there for all to see.
Well, we found something rather better than his notes. A conversation with Charles Colson, which I don't think has ever been published.
Okay, here we go.
It hasn't been published, you say?
No, but one of my researchers found it in Washington, where it's available to anyone who consults the records.
Oh, well, I just wondered, you know, if we'd seen it.
More than seen it, Mr. President. You spoke the actual words. Now, you've always claimed you first learned of the break-in on June 23rd.
Oh.
But this transcript of a tape made 3 days earlier clearly shows that to be a falsehood. Now, in it, you say to Colson, this whole investigation rests unless one of the 7 begins to talk. That's the problem.
Well, what do we mean when we say one of the 7 beginning to talk?
They're moving on to a conversation you had with John Dean on March 21st the following year. In one transcript alone, there in black and white, I picked out, and these are your words, 1, you could get $1 million and you could get it in cash. I know where it could be gotten. 2, your major guy to keep under control is Hunt. 3, don't we have to handle the Hunt situation? 4, get the $1 million. It would seem to me that would be worthwhile. 5, don't you agree that you better get the Hunt thing going? 6, first you've got the Hunt problem. That ought to be handled. 7, the money can be provided. Ehrlichman could provide the way to deliver it. 8, we've no choice with Hunt but the $120,000 or whatever it is, right? 9, Christ, turn over any cash we've got, and I could go on. Now, it seems to me that someone running a cover-up couldn't have expressed it more clearly than that.
Let me just stop you now right there, because you're doing something here, which I am not doing and I will not do. throughout these entire broadcasts. You're quoting me out of context, out of order, and I might add, I have participated in all these interviews without a single note in front of me.
Well, it is your life, Mr. President. Now, you've always maintained that you knew nothing about any of this until March 21st. But in February, your personal lawyer came to Washington to start the raising of $219,000 of hush money to be paid to the burglars. Now, do you seriously expect us to believe that you had no knowledge of that?
None. I believe the money was for humanitarian purposes, to help disadvantaged people with their defenses.
Well, it was being delivered on the tops of phone booths with aliases and at airports by people with gloves on. That's not normally the way lawyers' fees are delivered.
Look, I have made statements to this effect before. All that was Haldeman and Ehrlichman's business. I knew nothing. Okay, fine. Fine. You made a conclusion there. I stated my view. Now let's move on. Let's get on with the rest.
No, hold on.
No, I don't want to talk
If
to you.
Haldeman and Ehrlichman were the ones really responsible, when you subsequently found out about it, why didn't you call the police and have them arrested? Isn't that just a cover-up of another kind?
Well, maybe I should have done that. Maybe I should have just called the feds into my office and said, hey, there's the two men. Haul them down to the dock, fingerprint them, and then throw them in the can. I'm not made that way. These men, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, I knew their families. I knew them since they were just kids. Oh, yeah, but you know, politically, the pressure on me to let them go, that became overwhelming. So I did it. I cut off one arm, then I cut off the other, and I'm not a good butcher. And I have always maintained what they were doing, what we were all doing, was not criminal. Look, when you're in office, you gotta do a lot of things sometimes that are not always, in the strictest sense of the law, legal. But you do them because they're in the greater interests of the nation.
Right, wait, just so I understand correctly. Are you really saying that in certain situations, the president can decide whether it's in the best interests of the nation and then do something illegal?
I'm saying that when the president does it, that means it's not illegal.
I'm sorry?
That's what I believe.